California is the richest state in the United States. However, behind its glamour lies a hidden fear of earthquakes. The San Andreas Fault, located at the boundary of the Pacific and North American plates, posed a potential threat capable of causing major earthquakes at any moment. The people of California referred to the earthquake that has yet to arrive, and may someday come, as the Big One. Before me was a seismologist claiming that the big one would come within this year. He appeared to be in his mid-60s. He was shorter for a Caucasian with a stout body and a protruding belly, white hair, and both a goatee and mustache that were also white. He wore thick horn-rimmed glasses and suspenders. His first impression was that of a kindly old professor. "Nice to meet you. I am Dr. Kiran Mohan." In Western culture, titles such as degrees are considered very important, so it's customary to attach them to the name. "Nice to meet you. I'm Kang Jin Hu. You probably know enough about me, so there's no need for lengthy introductions." Taekyu also bowed his head. "This is my friend Taekyu. I look forward to working with you." The black woman who guided us here was Professor Mohan's assistant, named Carrie Cartwright. She looked to be around my age or slightly older. She adjusted her glasses and asked me, "Did you come here for research support?" Professor Mohan pretended to disapprove and said, "Ahem, discussing that already. Let's take our time with that. Since we have guests, let's start with coffee." "Understood, Professor." Carrie quickly went to get coffee and we took our seats. I looked around the lab. On one wall hung a large map, dotted with red marks and dozens of post-it notes attached. It seemed to indicate locations where earthquakes had occurred. On the other side, dozens of boxes were stacked up to the ceiling. I could see a book with a cover like the one I was holding between the open boxes. It looks like it hasn't sold well at all. After a moment, Carrie brought coffee. It had been on the hot plate for a long time, no aroma left, just a bitter taste. After a sip, I couldn't drink any more. But Professor Mohan looked accustomed to it. "You must be busy with work. What brings you all the way here?" "I have some things I want to ask you, Professor." I didn't seek him out because he is the most renowned and trusted scholar in the field of seismology. In fact, it was the opposite. Professor Mohan was almost an outcast in academia. Unlike mainstream scholars, he has claimed for a long time that a big one would hit San Francisco, and that it would happen this year. Yet half of this year has already passed and nothing he mentioned has occurred. Recently, there have been frequent underwater earthquakes, but most people believe it's hard to view these as precursors to a major earthquake. Still, Professor Mohan refused to back down from his claims. Some even mocked him with the nickname Indian. When an Indian performs a rain ceremony, it always rains. This is because they keep performing the ceremony until it rains. In other words, his tendency to repeat a false claim until it becomes true resembles the Indian custom. Although he is ignored and treated as an eccentric in academia, he is a genuine professor of geology at Caltech. In other universities, one might obtain a professorship through money and connections even without talent, but that's impossible at Caltech. Mediocre skills wouldn't suffice to teach the students. I placed the book on the desk. "I read the book you wrote all night, Professor." At my words, Professor Mohan was delighted, unable to contain himself. "Haha, I see you've read the book and become a fan of mine." He took a pen out of his pocket. Even without being asked, he signed on the first page of the book as if to show off. "Now I can't return it." "But why did you become interested in this field?" "Well, it was because of the risk. Since it was a question I expected, I gave the prepared answer. After experiencing an earthquake at the airport, I thought it could be dangerous. As you know, many subsidiaries of OTK Company, including the Kairos Institute, are based in Silicon Valley." Professor Mohan nodded. "I see. It's natural to be concerned since the businesses are there. As you know, Caltech is renowned for its earthquake research. In the field of seismology, MIT doesn't even compare." His pride was evident in his expression and tone. And rightfully so. California Institute of Technology has a world-famous seismology center. Charles Richter, who created the Richter scale still used in earthquake measurements, was also a professor here. "You mentioned in your book that a massive earthquake surpassing the Great East Japan earthquake could hit San Francisco. Do you still think the same way?" Professor Mohan nodded again. "Absolutely. The big one will come, and much sooner than you think." That's exactly the answer I wanted. Just hearing this response was enough to fulfill my purpose for being here. If the big one hits San Francisco, will it be able to withstand it? San Francisco is an earthquake-prone area and has experienced several major quakes in the past. Therefore, most high-rise buildings are designed to withstand strong quakes. However, even with that, if the ground splits or liquefaction occurs, they will inevitably collapse. Professor Mohan stood the book up vertically. He pressed down on the top with his hand and said, "High-rises are strong against vertical forces. But..." This time he lightly tapped the side. The book, slightly tilted, fell over instantly. As you can see, they are quite weak against horizontal forces. If the ground splits or collapses, causing the center of gravity to shift even slightly sideways, they will collapse in an instant. Taku blinked and asked, "Isn't the Leaning Tower of Pisa is tilted?" "That's a very special case. It started leaning during construction, so they kept shifting the center axis as they built the tower. If it had been that tilted from the start, it would have collapsed long ago." Professor Mohan continued, "Since the 20th century, there have only been a few earthquakes above 9.0. The most recent was the Great East Japan earthquake. I think the big one will be even stronger." I recalled the intersection I had seen. If the big one hits, which area would suffer the most damage? It would be better to explain it while looking at a map. Professor Mohan cleared the desk and unfolded a large map. The map showed California, the west coast, and fault lines. Based on the shape of the San Andreas Fault and recent earthquakes, the southern part of San Francisco is the most likely to be affected. It should be around here. He marked a spot next to Palo Alto in Redwood City, and drew several concentric circles around it. The innermost circle will be completely devastated, and the surrounding area won't be safe either. The area encompassed San Francisco and Oakland above and San Jose below. In short, it included the entire San Francisco Bay. What about casualties? Professor Mohan thought for a moment and then replied, "The population of San Francisco is close to 1 million, and including the Bay Area, the resident population is in the millions. Moreover, this region is always bustling with tourists and businesspeople, so there could be at least hundreds of thousands, maybe even 1 million. Taku shouted in surprise, "Whoa, 1 million people." I too was shocked, even though I had a rough idea from what I had read. During the Great East Japan earthquake, the human toll included about 20,000 deaths and missing persons. For Japan, it was the worst disaster since World War II. Fortunately, it occurred in the Tohoku region, or else if a similar earthquake had struck the Tokai region near Tokyo, Japan might have faced an irrecoverable state. So, what about San Francisco? California is the largest state in the U.S. in terms of population and economic power. The GDP of this one state ranks 5th in the world, surpassing countries like the UK and France. Among these, the area of San Francisco and Silicon Valley is home to the world's wealthiest individuals and top talents. The U.S. population is about 330 million. Thinking positively, even if 1 million people die, that's only 0.3% of the U.S. population. However, the problem is that those million individuals are crucial personnel driving the country forward. The U.S. can be seen as centered around 3 main areas. The capital, Washington, D.C., is the political center. Manhattan, New York with Wall Street, is the financial hub, and California's Silicon Valley area is the industrial center. In Silicon Valley, not only American companies but also numerous global corporations have their research labs and headquarters. Companies include Apple, Facebook, Microsoft, Google, AMZ, Seagate, Hewlett-Packard, AMD, Nvidia, Intel, Micron, Netflix, etc. Korean companies are no exception. Samsung Electronics, CL Electronics, and SK Hynix also have research centers in this region. But what if the buildings housing these companies collapse and the people working there lose their lives? Professor Mohan looked at us and said, "The economic, social, and political damage that the U.S. will incur is beyond imagination. They might even lose their status as a hegemonic power. Throughout human history, empires have always existed. After World War II, the U.S. became the center of the world, ushering in the era of Pax Americana. It is not an exaggeration to say that the peace and prosperity enjoyed by humanity today is under the order established by the U.S. If such a country were to suffer a fatal blow and fall, I don't think China or Russia would just sit back and watch that situation." I felt a cold sweat trickling down my back. I had anticipated some of this, but this goes beyond that. Professor Mohan smiled wryly. "Of course, this is an extreme assumption. I only hope such a thing does not happen. However, we must consider the consequences of the Chernobyl accident. Once, the Soviet Union was a superpower dividing the world with the United States. The collapse of the Soviet Union was triggered by the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. Undoubtedly, the Soviet Union would have fallen even without that accident. Yet it is undeniable that it served as the decisive blow. Even if an arm is broken in an accident with proper treatment and diligent rehabilitation, one can become healthier than before. But if an arm is severed, treatment and rehabilitation lose all meaning. One must live the rest of their life with only one arm. So, which scenario does this earthquake represent? If what I've seen is accurate, the Silicon Valley area will be completely devastated. The ground will crack and buildings will collapse. I can't see what comes next, but a tsunami is likely to follow. One fortunate thing is that the prediction is for a San Francisco earthquake, rather than a California earthquake. Thus, the impact of the earthquake is likely to be limited to San Francisco and its surroundings, rather than affecting all of California. This alone is a horrific situation, but it is not entirely the worst-case scenario. If LA or other major cities were included, the loss of life and property damage would have been unmanageable. No matter what measures are taken, an earthquake cannot be prevented. Fortunately, we have been given time to prepare. There are just over 2 months until Big One arrives. How we act in that time will determine our fate, the fate of America, and the fate of the world. I have only been investing to make money until now. I haven't really cared much about the impact it would have on society. But this time it has completely surpassed that level. The lives of countless people and the fate of the world are at stake. Thinking about that suddenly made my head spin. Why me? I'm only in my 20s. I understand that the big one is coming. But I'm curious, why do you think it's this year? Besides Professor Mohan, there were several others concerned about the possibility of the big one. However, most believed the likelihood of it happening in the near future was extremely low. The timing of a disaster is as important as its scale. The only one who matched the timing I discovered was him. To answer that, I first need to talk about my grandmother. Actually, there's another reason why he's called the Indian. His grandmother is genuinely an Indian. Professor Mohan's grandfather was an anthropologist who studied the ecology of American natives. The Indians, originally the owners of this land, were barely surviving in reservations now. His grandfather met an Indian woman during his research and fell in love. He married her despite fierce opposition from his family. So, although he appears to be an ordinary white man, a quarter of Professor Mohan's blood is Indian. My grandmother's ancestors were shamanic Indians. Since I was young, she told me many stories. What kind of stories? Stories of indigenous myths, history, culture, life, and about this land. My grandmother used to say that a great disaster would fall upon this land, and she said it would happen in September of this year. Really? Taekyu and I were shocked and looked at each other's faces. Taekyu had his mouth open, looking foolish. My expression was probably not much different. I consider myself to be a very sensible and rational person. Of course, I never believed in supernatural powers or superstitions. But one day I gained an unbelievable ability. This brought about a question. Could it be that someone else has a similar ability? Professor Mohan, perhaps misinterpreting our expressions, cleared his throat and said, Well, that's not the only reason. Considering various circumstances, I came to that conclusion. In a way, it was as if he predetermined the outcome and sought evidence to match it. However, thanks to that, he was able to discover things others could not see. Perhaps Professor Mohan became a seismologist because of his grandmother's influence. Could I possibly meet your grandmother? Professor Mohan shook his head. She passed away 15 years ago. Oh. Thinking back, it's quite natural. Since Professor Mohan is in his 60s, his grandmother would no longer be alive. Since she has passed away, there's no way to confirm whether she possessed a similar ability to mine. But for some reason I felt that she likely did. Before she passed away, she left a will urging me to leave California. If she truly had foreseen the earthquake, it would make sense for her to warn her grandson to stay away. So why are you still here? What would I do running away by myself, leaving countless people in California? I see. Professor Mohan smiled. Well, even though I say that, this place is relatively safe. The dangerous part is San Francisco. I recalled the scene I had witnessed. The ground had split open, buildings had collapsed. This was likely because it was close to the epicenter. The surrounding areas would also suffer damage, but not in such a drastic way. Professor Mohan focused on collecting and analyzing data related to earthquakes occurring in the Pacific Ring of Fire to increase forecasting possibilities. They say that if warned just 10 seconds in advance, 90% of casualties from an earthquake could be prevented. Of course, in the case of a real major quake, 10 seconds wouldn't be nearly enough. Is related research still ongoing? I asked quickly. Current research has been halted, Carrie replied. Why? I asked shocked. Funding from the state government has been stopped. Indeed, money seems to drive the world. Well, if there's money, then the research can continue, right? Absolutely. I nodded. Thank goodness I have plenty of money. I said this while looking at Professor Mohan and Carrie. I will support future research funding. I'll arrange for immediate assistance, so don't worry about the money and resume your research right away. Carrie was overjoyed and Professor Mohan also looked thrilled. Let's work well together moving forward. I will certainly do my best. If they knew what was to come because of me, they wouldn't be so happy. However, there's no need to share that here. We met an esteemed expert and heard his claims. And I intend to believe and follow them. Of course, people might think I've been deceived by a nutcase or a charlatan, but nonetheless, this will give legitimacy to my actions going forward. After the conversation ended, we left the laboratory. Now that we've secured the profit, the most important issue has been resolved. I called the company and immediately instructed them to transfer the research funding. With a single word, $1 million was wired to Caltech. Next, I called Chairman Im Jin-young. It was midnight in Korea, but fortunately we connected right away. I apologize for contacting you at this late hour. Chairman Im Jin-young replied warmly. It's okay. I heard you are on a business trip to the US. Yes. There are a few matters to attend to. I got straight to the point. Do you know when the launch date for Apple Z is? Samsung Electronics is competing with iPhone in the premium phone market. They should be monitoring competitors' developments. I believe it's set for late September. What's the exact date? We don't know that yet either. Information about the launch date is classified. The Apple side will likely reveal it during the product announcement. Typically, the launch occurs within a week after the product announcement. But I couldn't just wait until then. Is there any way to find out? Chairman Im Jin-young asked me, sounding puzzled. Why is that? It must seem odd to suddenly be interested in another company's smartphone launch date. I'll explain in detail later. It's essential, so I'm asking for your help. Fortunately, he didn't press further. Understood. I will check as much as I can. Thank you. As soon as the call ended, my phone rang. The caller was Ellie. As soon as I answered, she asked, "Are you at Caltech right now?" I was taken aback by Ellie's words. Wait. How did you know? One of the Caltech students posted a photo on Facebook. They said you came to their school. A few articles came out too, titled, OTK Company CEO Visits Caltech. It felt like some kind of paparazzi situation. Now there's a fight in the comments between MIT students and Caltech students over the fact that you went to Caltech before MIT. Why on earth? So why did you go to Caltech? I had some people to meet. By the way, there's something I need to tell you, Ellie. I wasn't sure how to say it. It's probably better to say it quickly, right? What is it? Go ahead. About the summer vacation. I'm sorry, but I think we have to postpone it. After a moment, Ellie asked, why? Something came up. Ellie was silent for a while, seeming shocked. She had been so excited about going on vacation. Is it something important? Yes, very much so. A moment later, Ellie tried to sound cheerful as she said, then there's nothing we can do. Instead, promise me that once you're done with that, we'll definitely go on vacation. I promise. Let's talk more when we meet. When will you return to Korea? I'll leave tomorrow. I told her to send my regards to Hyunju Nuna and hung up the phone. We drove back to Silicon Valley for another 5 hours. It felt like a quick trip, yet a whole day had passed. I'm so tired. Let's eat first. We parked at the hotel and headed to a nearby restaurant. Despite the late hour, the buildings were lit up and the city was bustling. At night, the energy felt even more alive. I pulled my hat down, worried people might recognize me, and sat in a corner. Inside the restaurant, people of various ethnicities interacted freely, exchanging conversations and information. This diversity and connectivity must be the strength of this city. While our meal was being prepared, the beer arrived first. You asked, "What are you going to do now?" I took a sip of my beer and replied, "I need to start thinking about that now." I hadn't notified anyone, but the fact that I was in Silicon Valley soon became known. Meeting requests flooded in from all over. Entrepreneurs, investors, politicians, and more. To meet them all, I would need to stay here for at least a month. I politely begged off and boarded my flight back to Korea. Throughout the return trip, I thought about what needed to be done. 2 months might seem like a long time, but it was woefully insufficient to prepare for a large-scale disaster. I skimmed through my notes again. Professor Mohan discussed the risks of the big one throughout the book and demanded government measures. The key issues included evacuating the population in the most dangerous areas closest to the epicenter, constructing shelters for displaced people, stockpiling relief supplies for immediate support, and establishing rescue plans. During the over 10-hour flight, I reviewed printed materials I had prepared in advance and prioritized my tasks. By the time we landed at the airport, I reached a conclusion. I need money. How much? A lot. There were many expenses during this time, but income had been minimal. While OTK Games paid out quarterly dividends, it was nowhere near the needed amount. Fortunately, the value of the companies I had shares in had significantly increased. Just Keros alone was valued at over $100 billion. Upon landing in Incheon Airport, we took a car to Gangnam. Before entering the OTK company building, we stopped by the Golden Gate building first. When we went up to the branch manager's office, I saw Hyunju Nuna at work. "Did you have a good business trip?" "Yeah." "Where's Ellie?" "She went to a branch for a bit. She'll be back soon." You handed her an envelope he had been holding. "I brought a gift for you, Nuna." Still in the midst of all this, I bought 2 packs of Dunhill 1mm at the duty-free shop as a gift for my Nuna. There's no better gift for a smoker than this. Hyunju received it without declining. "Well done." We sat on the sofa. The secretary brought out coffee. "Are you very busy?" "As always." Hyunju immediately opened the duty-free cigarettes, put one in her mouth and lit it. "I know you're busy, but I'd like to ask you for a favor." "What is it?" "I plan to issue bonds. There are 2 main ways for a company to raise cash: selling stock and issuing bonds. Bonds have the advantage of receiving fixed interest, much like a deposit, but since there's no principal guarantee, you might not get your money back if the company fails. The case of Hozong Savings Bank is a typical example. Therefore, the creditworthiness of the issuing company was crucial. Hyunju said while smoking. "Corporate bonds?" "Yes. I'm thinking about a 3-year maturity, dollar-denominated. Please decide on the interest rate and payment method, Nuna. If it's OTK company bonds, there should be quite a demand. How much are you thinking of?" $20 billion. At my words, Hyunju was taken aback. $20 billion? Not one. I said it's dollar-denominated. Though it's termed as $20 billion at this level, it's not just corporate bonds. It's like issuing government bonds. Hyunju asked, looking bewildered. "Where do you plan to spend that much money?" "I have places to invest." "Invest?" I spoke with confidence. "I'm thinking of investing for the future." Hyunju pressed her forehead with her fingers, possibly due to a headache. As the cigarette in her mouth burned down to almost nothing, she crushed it into the ashtray and said, "What are you thinking about this time?" $20 billion. Approximately 22 trillion Korean won. With this amount, one could buy a significant corporation outright and potentially change the landscape of an industry. Taekyu said, "It's important, Nuna." "So what is this important matter?" I forced a bitter smile. "I'll tell you later." She must have understood it wasn't just a joke. "What are you really?" At that moment, Ellie opened the door and walked in. Whether it was due to the hot weather outside or her rush to get here, beads of sweat were forming on her forehead. "Jinhoo, did you have a good trip to America?" "Of course. The next while would be incredibly busy. Still, I hope to have time today." I stood up first. "I'll give you the details later. Just keep this in mind and get ready. I'll borrow the head of the legal team for a bit." I grabbed Ellie's hand and left the branch manager's office to head to the elevator. "Where are we going?" "On a date. But I haven't finished my work yet. Let's consider this a half day off." Ellie smiled and nodded. Is that so? We got into the car. I sat in the driver's seat, fastened my seatbelt and asked, "Where do you want to go?" Ellie responded as if she had been waiting for the question. Amusement park. Koreans often go on dates to amusement parks, so I've always wanted to go with you at least once. I expected her to mention a fancy place, but she wanted an amusement park. It seems she wanted to experience a typical date like others do. There are two famous amusement parks in the metropolitan area. Lita World, a subsidiary of Lita Group, and Neverland, a subsidiary of Samsung Group. In terms of proximity, Lita World is closer, but in terms of facilities and scale, Neverland is overwhelming. Then shall we go to Neverland? Ellie looked as excited as a child. Really? Are you really going to take me there? Of course. It's in Yongin, so it's not far from here. Just as she was joyfully bouncing with excitement, Ellie suddenly stared intently at my face. What's wrong? You know it well. Have you ever been there with a girlfriend? The truth is I have. I went there once with Sienna when we were dating. But I can't just say that, right? I don't think so. Ellie nodded with a knowing smile. That was a wise answer. I'll give you an A+. Thank you. If this continues, it might look like office workers are sneaking off together. That's not a big deal, but if someone recognizes me, it'll get annoying. I think we should start with shopping. I first drove to a nearby SPA store. Ellie picked out 2 white t-shirts with character designs. You know, a theme park outfit is definitely couple shirts. Is she really planning to do what everyone else does? I changed clothes first and came out. After a moment, Ellie emerged from the fitting room. Instead of the formal suit she had on earlier, she wore jeans and a white t-shirt with prints, along with sandals that showed her toes. She also wore sunglasses that partially covered her face. How do I look? The completion of fashion is indeed the face. Even though it was SPA wear, Ellie looked like she was in a photo shoot. After buying the clothes, we got back in the car and headed to Neverland. There shouldn't be anyone who recognizes us, but just in case, plainclothes bodyguards followed us. On the way, I received a call from Taikyu. Where are you going? We're headed to Neverland. Should I call Chairman Im Jin-young and ask him to send you 2 all-access passes? I'll just buy them myself. What's with calling such a busy chairman? When we arrived at Neverland, we bought our all-access passes and entered. With our arms crossed, we wandered around the amusement park, riding various attractions. There were many new rides since I last visited. Despite it being a weekday afternoon, there were a lot of visitors. Students on a school trip, family outings, and couples among others. As expected, the gaze of the crowd was drawn to Ellie. One man stared blankly at her until his girlfriend pinched him. As soon as we got off the ride, Ellie grabbed my hand and led me. Let's go ride that one next. How about we take a break and have some coffee? What do you mean? We've come all this way, we should ride at least one more. While Ellie was full of energy, my stamina was quickly depleting. I realized I hadn't had a chance to rest since getting off the plane. In the evening, a parade and performances began. Ellie, seemingly unfazed, chased after the parade and watched it until the end. Eventually, when the security guards following us looked tired as well, we exited the amusement park. Ellie said with a hint of disappointment, they don't have fireworks on weekdays. I wanted to see that too. We drove back to Gangnam and had a late dinner at a Mexican restaurant. Our ordered fajitas and quesadillas arrived. Should we have some wine? With Mexican food, tequila is a must. We clinked our shot glasses together. Even though we hadn't had many drinks, the high alcohol content quickly made my face flush red. Now tell me. What about? Why can't you take a vacation? Do you know how disappointed I am? Seeing my expression, Ellie smiled brightly. It's okay. I'll forgive you because today's date was fun. We finished an entire bottle of tequila together before the restaurant closed. It seemed like Ellie drank a bit more than I did. There was no need to call a separate driver as the security guard drove for us, and we sat in the back seat. Throughout the ride, Ellie held my hand and rested her head on my shoulder. It didn't take long to reach the hotel. It's already here. I'll watch you go up. We got out of the car together and walked into the lobby. Ellie looked disappointed that we had to part ways, and I felt the same. Meanwhile, the elevator arrived and the door opened. As Ellie stepped into the elevator, she said, I had fun today. You must be tired, so hurry inside and rest. Good night. The elevator door slowly closed. Unknowingly, I pressed the button, making the closing door open again. What should I say? As I hesitated, Ellie spoke first. Want to have one more drink? I have some leftover wine from last night. Oh, should we? I stepped into the elevator with her. A strangely awkward silence surrounded us. Ellie's place was on the 26th floor. When we arrived at the door, she opened it with her card key. Ellie stepped inside first and I followed her in. While I'd often seen her off in front of the hotel, this was only the second time I had entered her room. Was it the first time since we decided to date? The door closed on its own. The room was still dark since she hadn't used the card key yet. In that moment, Ellie suddenly turned and hugged me, kissing me. The sweet scent mingled with the smell of alcohol. After a long kiss, Ellie pulled away and said, "This is the price for canceling our vacation." It had been a few months since we started dating, and while physical affection and kisses felt natural, we were both a bit cautious about taking it further. Of course, I had an overwhelming desire to, but we were both so busy and the people around us also made me slightly anxious. It felt like there was a delicate line that prevented us from becoming more intimate. However, now I felt ready to cross that line. When Ellie inserted the card key, the lights turned on automatically. Maybe it was the alcohol or perhaps another reason, but her face was flushed bright red. I couldn't help but stare at her for a while because she looked so beautiful. Ellie spoke with an awkward expression. "Oh, we came to drink wine, right? So the wine." I took her hand and pulled her into my embrace. Then we kissed again as I led her toward the bedroom. We collapsed onto the bed, still holding each other tightly. I reached out to caress Ellie's cheek. "Are you okay?" In response to my question, Ellie slowly closed her eyes instead of answering. As I regained my senses, I found myself standing in the middle of the city. I immediately recognized where I was. Across the street, hundreds of people were lined up in front of a glass building, brimming with excitement at the prospect of buying the iPhone Z. Next to me stood a white man in a suit, busy with a phone call, Bluetooth earphones in place, constantly checking his wristwatch. His face was filled with irritation. The traffic light was still red. I knew what would happen when the signal changed. Yet those unaware of the truth laughed and chatted merrily. Why was I being shown this? If one knows nothing and does nothing, it's fine. But knowing means I inevitably have to make a choice. The consequences and responsibilities that follow that choice would be mine to bear. As I pondered these thoughts, the signal changed. The people waiting at the crosswalk all hurried across. Bang! With a deafening roar, the ground cracked and shook violently. Those waiting in front of the Apple store screamed and fled. But as the earth crumbled, most fell downwards. Cars racing on the road collided and honked. Some drivers leaped from their cars and began to run. The surrounding high-rise buildings started to tilt. Shattered glass and debris rained down. Objects falling from several floors above were as lethal as weapons. A computer crashed down right atop someone's head. It was an unreal scene, something out of a movie. At some point, I found myself holding onto the hand of the suited man. He looked at me with terror, screaming for his life. I tried to pull him up, but I knew the truth: I couldn't save him. As the skyscraper toppled, it obscured the sun. And in that moment, gasp. The first thing I saw when I opened my eyes was Ellie's shocked expression. "Are you okay?" "Yes." Cold sweat trickled down my forehead. Ellie pulled back the blanket and got up to get me some water. In the darkness, a bizarre silhouette appeared. You were suddenly moaning and tossing around. Returning under the blanket, Ellie turned on the light slightly. I gulped down the water. I had a dream. What kind of dream? How should I explain this? I spoke carefully. It was a dream where people were dying. That sounds scary. Ellie accepted the cup. I mumbled a question. If I could save someone with the money I have, what should I do? After a moment of thought, Ellie asked me, "What do you want to do, Jinho?" Even now, if I close my eyes, the images of dying people come to mind. Strictly speaking, I have no obligation to save them. If I foolishly intervene, I might waste my money and end up in danger. Can I really handle all of that? I spoke honestly. I still don't know whether it's something I should do or can do. No matter how much money and how amazing a person is, they can't do everything. That's true. Even now, countless people on Earth are dying from war, hunger, disease, and disasters. Doesn't everyone know what's happening in places like Syria or in ISIS-occupied territories? Even if I gather all the money and influence I have, I can't save them all. But, can I really turn a blind eye to the death in front of me and go on living as if nothing happened? What if all the money I have disappears, and I'm no longer the CEO of OTK company? Is that okay? At my words, Ellie's face hardened. What are you trying by saying that right now? So, are you suggesting I'm only fond of you because you have money? Well, not exactly. After staring at me for a while, Ellie suddenly burst into laughter as if she found it absurd. There are various reasons for liking someone. Appearance, personality, education, job, family, etc. Money is also one of them. In a capitalist society, having money is definitely an attractive quality. It's not particularly wrong to like that. Ellie made a pretentious expression. It doesn't matter whether you have money or not. I'm really trying not to boast about it in front of you, but with just my salary we could live quite well together. Her expression was so cute that I burst into laughter. Well, that's true. I had momentarily forgotten how beautiful she was. That my girlfriend is a capable Golden Gate lawyer. Can you believe in me until the end no matter what happens in the future? Of course. You just needs to do what you wants to do. What I want to do. Thank you. I no longer hesitated and solidified my decision. Once I woke up I couldn't fall asleep again. We lay side by side and talked. So why do you like me, Ellie? Ellie simply replied, because you're so cool. I didn't have any particular complaints about my appearance, but objectively, aren't there many men in the world who are better looking than me? Ellie reminisced. The first time I learned about you was because of the L6 incident. The Korean stock market crashed, causing chaos at the Asian branch. I became curious then about who made such an investment. Eventually I followed Jessica to Korea and met you. At that point I never thought I would end up liking a man I met in a foreign land. So you liked me right from our first meeting? Well, it seems that way. For some reason you looked stunning to me, like you had a sparkling aura. Is that so? Hearing this made me think of someone. Sienna had said something similar before. As we continued talking while lying down I slowly began to feel sleepy. I turned slightly to switch off the light and Ellie hugged me from behind. The tender and soft sensation sent a rush through my body, and her breath tickled my ear. I couldn't resist and turned to kiss Ellie. I have to go to work. What's wrong with being late? I can't. Jessica will scold me. Even as I said that, Ellie became more proactive than I was. There was still plenty of time until the sun rose. We ordered room service for breakfast. Wearing our robes, we had a simple breakfast and enjoyed some coffee. Ellie took a shower and got dressed in a suit. The hotel wasn't far from the Golden Gate building. After parking nearby, I checked to make sure there were no people around and kissed Ellie. She playfully complained, "Ugh, I don't want to go to work." Can't you skip it? If I skip work without notice, Jessica will be mad. It is scary when she gets angry. Ellie forced herself to muster some motivation. And if I want to support you in the future, I need to work hard. Just hearing that makes me feel reassured. After watching Ellie walk into the building, I started my car and headed home to change instead of going straight to work. It didn't take long to get home. I parked in the underground garage and took the elevator up to the living room. As soon as the door opened, I saw Taekyu sitting on the couch with his arms crossed. I was taken aback. Whoa, what are you doing here? Taekyu looked at me and reprimanded sternly. What were you doing all night that you didn't come home or contact anyone after going on a date? I quickly tried to explain. No, that's not it. But why was I even explaining myself to him? Taekyu tapped my shoulder and said, "Congratulations, my friend." What are you congratulating me for? When are you getting married? Why are we talking about marriage already? I suppose I'll do it when the time comes. I dropped onto the sofa. I had only planned to change clothes and head to work, but now that I'm home, even moving a finger feels bothersome. I think I might be a bit sleepy. Did you not sleep at all while doing something? Figure it out yourself. Taekyu smiled meaningfully. Hee hee hee. What kind of dirty thoughts are you having? Let's talk about work. We had 3 options. First, we could ignore what Oracle saw and do nothing. In this case, our subsidiary and research labs based in Silicon Valley would suffer significant losses when the earthquake strikes. And the United States, hit directly by the earthquake, would be thrown into chaos for a while, leaving openings for China, Russia, and India to expand their influence. Perhaps during this process, conflicts would arise, plunging the world into even greater chaos. That would truly be the worst-case scenario. The second option is to notify everyone of the risk and relocate our business first. This way we could minimize the immediate damage we'd face. The problem is, who would believe and follow what I say? Disasters can only be understood as threats once they occur. What if someone had said the day before Pompeii's destruction that Mount Vesuvius would erupt? What if someone had shouted the day before the Great East Japan earthquake that a tsunami was coming, leading to a nuclear meltdown? Did people believe the warning and evacuate, or did they treat the speaker as a madman? If no warning had been given, that would be one thing, but if a clumsy warning is made afterwards when something happens, there would be criticisms of, only you ran away, and, why didn't you act more decisively? It would mean becoming a bad Samaritan. What's the third option? To risk everything using any means necessary, to evacuate as many people as possible to minimize damage. Didn't we already decide to do that? Yes. We have to save lives. That's how we survive. The casualties from the 9/11 attacks were about 10,000. Even that alone caused global stock markets to crash. South Korea was no exception, with both Kospi and Kosdaq hitting their lower limits, setting unprecedented records. But what if the US faced damages 100 times that? Of course, there's a difference between a terror attack and a disaster, but it's clear that both finance and industry would be paralyzed for a while. When the system stops, production and consumption cannot proceed properly. The companies owned by OTK company mostly sell consumer goods and services, not essentials. Take Karos for example. They're about to launch new cars in the second half of the year. But in such a situation, who will buy cars, watch porn, or order pizza? In other words, preventing maximum damage is our only way to survive. Yet the reason I continued to worry was, before the earthquake happens, we'll face overwhelming criticism and mockery. If by any chance the prediction is wrong, we could lose everything. If false rumors cause social chaos, we must bear the responsibility. The reputation built over time could crumble in an instant, leading to endless liabilities. But the earthquake is bound to happen. That seems likely. Sometimes great courage is needed to do the right thing. I realized this while talking to Ellie yesterday. I'm not sure if this is something I have to do or can do, but it's definitely something I want to do. You nodded. I guess there's no choice. If you want to do it, you should. What about you? Are you ready? What do I have to be ready for? You're going to take all the criticism anyway. That's true. As always, rumors spread faster than words. The fact that I decided to support Professor Kiran Mohan's research quickly became known here and there. The situation was different from when it was with Professor Kim Ho-min. Batteries are directly related to our business, whereas earthquakes have little correlation. Additionally, while Professor Kim Ho-min is recognized and respected as a skilled professional in both industry and academia, Professor Mohan is viewed as a maverick in academia for his far-fetched claims. Would the government have cut off support for no reason? Despite being considered eccentric, he is a professor at Caltech. His abilities shouldn't be in doubt, though his claims are extreme and poorly supported. There were various speculations and gossip about my actions. The seismology community reacted with disbelief. I didn't pay much attention to those reactions. Since I'm spending my own money, who can say anything? Carrie organized the requested materials on behalf of the busy Professor Mohan and sent them over. It contained a clear summary of the earthquakes that occurred in the Pacific Ring of Fire over the last decade. Surprisingly, there were over hundreds. This was just the direct damage caused by them. If we include offshore earthquakes or those that went unobserved, it would be countless. You looked astonished. Is there really this many earthquakes happening? There was one in Gyeongju last year. Japan is located entirely within the Pacific Ring of Fire, making earthquakes a daily occurrence. In contrast, Korea has been categorized as a relatively safe zone until now. However, the Gyeongju earthquake confirmed that Korea is not safe, and for a time disaster preparedness supplies sold like hotcakes. In any case, while there are countless earthquakes, only one or two can be considered major earthquakes per year, and most of those occur within the Pacific Ring of Fire. Can this convince everyone? I shook my head. It will probably be difficult. Bonds are issued based on credit. Government bonds are secured by the state's credit, while corporate bonds are secured by a company's credit. Government bonds issued by a country may seem safe, but that's not always the case. During the Greek bailout in 2015, countries holding government bonds lost nearly half their principal due to debt relief. And in Russia's 1998 moratorium, investors faced astronomical losses. The famous long-term capital incident happened then. Even if the bonds are repaid on time, one variable remains: the exchange rate. If the value of the country's currency crashes at maturity, foreign investors can incur foreign exchange losses despite earning returns from the bonds. Currently, Brazil's 10-year government bond yield is around 10%. This is 4 times that of most developed countries' bond yields. Some investors were attracted by the high rate, but the recent collapse of the real has led to significant losses. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Higher interest rates come with reasons. Of course, if bonds were issued in dollars from the start, there would be no such worry. The safest bond in the world is undoubtedly the U.S. government bonds. Berkshire Hathaway's chairman Warren Buffett has invested most of its reserves in U.S. government bonds and always asserts that they are the safest assets. This is understandable, as U.S. bonds remain safe unless the U.S. defaults on principal and interest. If that happens, one could assume the entire global financial system has collapsed. Hyunju analyzed the bond market and immediately reported the results. The issuance amount is $20 billion. The interest rate is 3.8%. Interest payments will be made annually. Currently, the yield on U.S. 3-year government bonds is in the low to mid 2% range, while the AA+ rated bonds of the Apple yield 3%. OTK company bonds might manage mid 3% rates. However, the volume is quite significant. Typically, such volumes would select an underwriter through competitive bidding, but as always, we entrusted it to Golden Gate. The fee was set at 8 basis points, 0.08%, of the sale price. The sale underwriter, instead of charging a hefty fee, must take responsibility for the sale volume. It's unreasonable to sell bonds that one does not want to purchase oneself. Golden Gate decided to absorb up to 20% of the total issuance in case of insufficient demand, amounting to $4 billion. Golden Gate made the issuance conditions for OTK company bonds public and gathered demand. After the financial crisis, countries worldwide lowered interest rates and injected money to stimulate their economies. As a result, liquidity surged in the market. With nowhere to go due to low interest rates, money sought out even slightly higher yielding opportunities. Unlike other companies, OTK company has minimal debt. While some subsidiaries have loans, they are manageable. In short, it's a corporate bond unlikely to incur losses. The maturity is short and the interest rates are reasonable. Furthermore, it has been clearly stated that there will be no more bond issuance within the next 3 years. Demand surged especially from institutions and pension funds. Organizations like Singapore's GIC, Dutch pension funds, and Norway's sovereign wealth fund showed significant interest, along with oil-rich countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Despite concerns about excessive supply, the demand easily exceeded 100%. This reflects a high evaluation of OTK companies' stability while also demonstrating the abundant global liquidity. The $20 billion corporate bond was sold out immediately upon issuance. Essentially, OTK company borrowed $20 billion globally at an interest rate of 3.8%. The total interest over 3 years amounts to 11.4%. They will need to pay $760 million annually, totaling $2.28 billion in interest over the 3 years. While the money will need to be repaid in 3 years, how and where to use it remains entirely up to me. I headed to the branch manager's office with Taekyu. Inside, Hyunju and Ellie were sitting together. Hyunju, smoking a cigarette, said, "Now tell me, why do you need $20 billion? I placed a book on the table. The title of the book was, "The Big One is Coming." "Have you read this book?" Ellie picked up the book and examined it. "Who wrote it?" "It's Professor Kiran Mohan." "He's the professor from Caltech that you met." "That's right. We've also agreed to support his research." Hyunju asked, "Does this relate to the corporate bond issuance?" I nodded. "There will be an earthquake in the US within a few months. To be exact, it's around 2 months from now." Hyunju and Ellie were taken aback by my words. "What? Is that true?" I shared what I heard from Professor Mohan with Taekyu. In summary, he predicted that a major earthquake would occur across the San Francisco Bay Area around September. As expected, Hyunju reacted incredulously. So you're saying you reached that conclusion just by believing that professor? I received some data and there's sufficient evidence. San Francisco, located on the San Andreas Fault, is one of the areas in the world most likely to experience earthquakes. There's no rule that something like the Great East Japan earthquake can't happen in San Francisco. San Francisco is one of the largest cities in the US, and as such, it has a dense population. It's like the difference between an earthquake happening in Gyeongju versus in the middle of Gangnam. Naturally, the loss of life and property damage aren't comparable. Taekyu chimed in beside me. Think about it. Has Jinhu ever been wrong? I had successfully made investments that others deemed impossible. The L6 explosion, Brexit, Ronald's election, and so on. Hyunju extinguished her cigarette in the ashtray. That may be true, but this case is different. I know. Hyunju looked straight at me and asked, "Are you really sure?" While I felt confident internally, I answered ambiguously on purpose. There's nothing wrong with being prepared. Hyunju sighed, seeming completely at a loss. So you're saying you'd spend over 20 trillion won preparing for something that might not happen? I'm thinking of investing half of that. I don't intend to take losses. I explained the plans I had made. But what if an earthquake doesn't happen? That's just $20 billion. If the new car is successful, I can earn that much easily. If it's not, I can sell a few subsidiaries, including Faceit. While $20 billion is a significant amount, it wouldn't put the company completely under, even if things went awry. In fact, considering what I plan to do in the future, it won't just end with losing money. But I don't need to mention that here. I deliberately spoke cheerfully. Anyway, it's already been decided, so just keep that in mind. I am the CEO of OTK Company. Therefore, my decision is the company's policy. If a similar earthquake occurs in another country, recovery will be unthinkable for a while. In fact, in cases like Nepal and Haiti, which suffered from major earthquakes years ago, recovery is still slow. However, the US is different. Considering the geographic location of San Francisco and its surrounding infrastructure, it won't be left as ruins. Just as a more magnificent and beautiful World Trade Center was built after the collapse of the Twin Towers during the 9/11 attacks, it is expected that massive recovery efforts will begin once the effects of the earthquake subside. Perhaps several megacities will be built simultaneously. If the damage is minimized, that timeline will accelerate significantly. Hearing this, Taekyu spoke up. From my experience in urban development. I interrupted. Taekyu quickly corrected himself. Based on my experience in SimCity, important materials for urban development and recovery are steel and concrete. I nodded. That's right. The most crucial element is steel. Steel is known as the rice of industry, as it is used across various sectors. It's no coincidence that Pohang Steel, now POSCO, was established with compensation received from Japan. Once recovery picks up, demand for steel will likely surge, creating upward pressure on producer prices. Companies like Unsung Steel, which have their own steel mills, can absorb some of the price increases, but those who purchase externally will suffer significantly. For Keros, preparing to launch new models in the second half of the year, it means recalculating production costs immediately. Currently, the steel industry is facing oversupply as Chinese manufacturers have started full-scale operations. International prices continue to fall, and steelmakers' stock prices have also plummeted. POSCO, once among the top in the Kospi market capitalization, has long been pushed out of the top 5. I called for Henry. Did you call for me? It seems like there's some dissatisfaction in his expression. It's understandable since he was excited about going on vacation with Hyunju and had even arranged for a villa in the Maldives, only to receive a sudden cancellation notice. Please go on a business trip to Japan and China. What's the matter? I'm considering purchasing steel. Henry asked in surprise, are you talking about automotive? Contact suppliers in secret and say to buy as much as possible for the next 3 years, regardless if it's for automotive, construction, or industrial use. Henry looked bewildered at my suggestion. Why would you buy construction steel? I briefly explained what Professor Mohan had told me and Henry was shocked. Unlike me and Taekyu, who are Korean, he's American. Hearing that a major earthquake might occur in his country naturally surprised him. Is it really true? I replied indirectly, it's not certain yet, but the possibility is quite significant. Though I said this, he certainly knows I wouldn't take action on mere possibilities. I don't quite understand. I wish Professor Mohan's words would turn out to be wrong. I wasn't trying to persuade him overly much. Regardless, I'm thinking of purchasing steel and concrete, considering future restoration demands. Companies will likely try to hedge against price fluctuations. Steel prices are linked to those of iron ore, scrap metal, and crude oil. Purchasing steel now is to prepare for future price increases. If it's linked to production costs, it wouldn't make much sense. Even if you add a premium to the current market price, just make sure to contract at a fixed price for everything. Also, say you'll pay as much upfront as needed. Considering future events, there isn't much time left. Additionally, we need to secure as much concrete, copper, and crude oil as possible. Henry still looked confused, seeming unsure if this was a joke. You'll find out soon enough, but until then, keep this to yourself. Ah, I understand. After Henry left, Taekyu asked, aren't you going to get criticized for investing like this? I'm not thinking about making a huge profit from this. If prices soar in the future, I plan to sell cheaply to the US government to stabilize the market. Taekyu was impressed. Oh, that's a good idea. After all, money can be made in many other ways. I then called Sanji up. How's work these days? I'm busy. I got dragged to a drinking party with a trading company yesterday and drank until dawn. He still looked like he hadn't fully sobered up. I smiled and said, you didn't just go because you wanted to drink, right? Sanjiop strongly denied it. No, it's not like that. The owner over there insisted he wanted to have a drink with me, so I had no choice but to go. The startups that K Company has invested in are growing rapidly in the domestic market. When considering the value of its subsidiaries, K Company could easily rank among the top in the industry. Both OTK Company and K Company are not included in the rankings published by the Fair Trade Commission, and the same goes for RCK Brothers, a PF. Some startups were beginning to mention the possibility of going public. However, given the parent company's robust financial strength, there was no real necessity felt to raise funds through an IPO. Speaking of which, it's been quite a while since I worked with you. Sanjiop joined us right after Hyunju, making him almost one of the founding members. That's why he was also given a share of K Company. What's wrong? I just thought of old times seeing you, Sanjiop. At my words, Sanjiop looked wide awake. What? You're not planning to cut me off, are you? I burst into laughter. No way. Without you, who am I going to delegate work to? Sanjiop sighed in relief. Phew, that's a relief. Delegate your current tasks to the staff and follow my instructions for a while. I just told Sang-yeop exactly what I had said to Henry. As expected, Sang-yeop was surprised. Are you saying that an earthquake will occur in San Francisco? Is that true? If Professor Mohan is correct, how likely is it that the professor is right? Not 100%, but quite high. It could happen this year or next. Wait a minute. If the earthquake hits, physical assets like gold and oil will skyrocket. Shouldn't we secure raw materials first? As expected, his mind was immediately focused on this aspect. That's why I trust him with tasks. I've entrusted that job to Henry. I'm assigning you something else. What job? Go to China and procure disaster preparedness supplies and relief materials. Tents, bottled water, blankets, emergency medicines, etc. How much volume? All. The production is capable within the next 2 months. The manufacturers are not just idling until we place an order. They need to increase their usual production to meet our request. Currently, only China can produce the maximum volume in a short time. If that's not sufficient, we plan to subcontract production to Mexico and Canada, as transportation times will be shorter. The next day, Henry and Sang-yeop crossed over to Japan and China respectively, and contacted relevant companies to carry out my instructions. In the meantime, I searched for an alternative site to relocate our subsidiaries based in Silicon Valley. Currently, the most promising locations appear to be Orange County, Pasadena, and around Ontario near LA. There will be considerable resistance to the sudden move, but we have no choice but to go ahead. At the same time, I looked for warehouses that could be rented short-term. They need to be in earthquake-safe zones, close to danger areas and easily accessible. This way we can quickly transport personnel and supplies. We need to inform the public as well. Who says something is as important as what is said? Given the wealth and reputation I've gained through my investments, people won't take my words lightly. Just my warning alone could reduce casualties, but that's not enough. To minimize damage, a national evacuation plan must be established. And among the people I know, there is exactly one person who can execute that. The issue is whether that person will believe me. Since its entry into the financial market, OTK Company has always been a subject of interest. People focused on where the $20 billion raised through corporate bond issuance would be invested. No matter how secret the contracts were, the rumors couldn't be kept at bay. Before long, news broke that OTK Company was making large-scale purchases of steel. This sparked rumors that OTK Company would be entering the construction industry, leading to a significant rise in the stock prices of the targeted construction firms. However, it didn't take long for those rumors to be debunked. OTK Company had started accumulating energy and non-ferrous metals in both spot and futures markets. The market struggled to decipher Kong Jinhu's intentions after the earthquake. Amidst this, a new rumor emerged, that they were stockpiling disaster preparedness and relief supplies. It was then that people recalled the recent news about Kong Jinhu sponsoring a professor from the California Institute of Technology, whose specialty was none other than seismology. Upon hearing this, President Park Si-hyung muttered, "What on earth is this guy planning this time?"